our study session this evening. We're joined by the Lift Board, we'll put a mess for tomorrow. This is our Urban Renewal Authority. So our first presentation is from the Lift Board. This is coming back to council. We met with the board in the spring, I think, was it April? March. And had a conversation at that time about wanting to get some more clarity from the board about what the intentions, what's the goals, what do you guys, what's the future look like? And I know you've been working hard on this for the last few months, putting this together, so we're anxious to see the presentation. I just want to let council know what the process will be. We'll make their presentation, we'll have an opportunity for some questions and answers, but beyond that, we will not be discussing it any further this evening. We have scheduled it for a study session on November 12th, thank you. And so council will discuss it at that point. We'll have more time to review the report and kind of mull over the information we get tonight. And then any action that council would take will be done on the 19th, November 19th. So this evening is an opportunity to hear the presentation and get some questions answered back and forth. But beyond that, there'll be no further discussion from council tonight on the issue. So I'm going to turn it over to Kevin Sealer, the chairman of the board, of the Lift Board. And Kevin?
Thank you, Mayor Brinkman. Also, thank you, Councilman. Sorry. Joining me also is Cindy Christensen, the Vice Chair, Bill Hopping, Jason Henderson, and Jack Reinchecke, Carol Brizak, and Joe Areno are unable to attend tonight. So after our meeting on March 15th, we got busy working and trying to move forward on some things. So since April, we did get a legal counsel that's independent of the city attorney. So if we have some concerns that come up that are in conflict that the city attorney cannot address or answer, we could go to them and get resolution. That's also one of the things that we do have outstanding is the loan that we have with you that is coming due in December. So if that gets renegotiated, we would want legal counsel to review that and help us through that process, because that would be a conflict for the city attorney to advise us on. With the help of the city staff, database interactive map of the URA was developed. So that helps us to identify who are the property owners in that area. We partnered with the city to contract with EPS to reach out to all the property owners and business owners within the URA to find out what their concerns are in that area, and to see if there were some potentials for us to partner with the various property owners in helping to remediate some of the issues in that area. And then we drafted a work plan. So we are here tonight to review that with you and answer any questions that you may have. Through that, we basically came up with two primary options. One is to assist a developer or developers or property owners to enhance the development of the Columbine Square URA. That was one of the things that came out of the EPS survey, is there was no common theme with most of the property owners where they saw issues. But the common thread was what's happening with that big piece of property at the north end there. So that is where we identified and tried to see what we could do there. The other thing that we've talked about and discussed is partnering with the city to direct infrastructure investment in this area. One of the options we discussed is such as a gateway, to clearly define that is Littleton and that you're entering Littleton as such. So the next steps is really a lot to focus with the owners of Columbine Square. See if they wish to use urban renewal as part of developing this property and build a relationship with the owner. I have been able to contact the current representative for the property owner. Her name is Tina Lee, and she works with the Caros Investment Management Company. And she has committed to getting back with the Urban Renewal Authority and myself at the beginning of November to start discussions about what can happen in that area when it comes to urban renewal. Possibly seed other development in the area with some of the other property owners. Looking to possibly re-engage with some of the property owners with some of the things that they brought out and maybe some of the things from the original URA review where the council in that study identified issues of blight in that area and see if we can remediate those concerns. Also, future project preparation, additional URAs that the city may undertake. A lot of it is, there's still a lot of work in that area to do. And financing options for both with Columbine Square and with any other property owners in that area. So the challenges we've come up with is, there's been a lot of time between projects. There's a problem with preservation of institutional knowledge and process. The board has seen a total turnover in the past 3 years. Myself and Ms. Brisiak are the most senior members of the LIFT board. And because of that turnover, there's no institutional knowledge or even familiarity with the Urban Renewal Act and what we can do within the law and such. So there's been a lot of trying to figure that out. We don't have an executive director that's well versed in this area to help us out with that. So that's been a big challenge. One of the other things that's challenge is the Envision Littleton adoption and what the City Council has been doing. We've been going on the premise that you will be adopting that. You haven't already.
Yep.
You have, that's right, I did read that. You have adopted that. So I think that would help us in the future guiding the process and what may happen in this area. We also would need City Council support for our next steps. One of the areas that we've been struggling with is how do we help a project along and making sure it aligns with City Council and the city's community's vision of what they want done in this area. As you may be aware, about half of the urban renewal authorities in the state of Colorado, the board is made up of the City Council. That's because there has to be that almost dovetailing of the two entities to figure out how this process moves forward. We don't want to work with the developer on a project and have City Council say, no, that's not the vision we have for the city. So we have to work together going forward to figure out how we work out that relationship and that vision and how, if a project were to come forward, how we shepherd that through our processes. Oops, missed a slide. So, any questions or discussion?
Jerry?
I do have a question. On your first page, I'm just kind of curious on line 22, you talked about you sought out and expected areas, the history, the culture, and the strengths. What are they? What did you find?
Oh, with
Yeah, what is the history and what is the culture and what is the strengths of this?
Where are you, Jerry?
On the first page of the report,
Okay.
line 22.
Under introductions, it's the last paragraph.
Mine's numbered.
I don't have lines.
Oh, that's because I printed mine that way.
You use
So
your
it would
slide
be, it'd be the
ruler.
third paragraph, second from the bottom.
I see. Thank you.
Oh, I see it. History.
It starts in
culture.
short.
In that respect, yeah.
Yeah, I was just kind of curious.
well, there are some businesses that are doing very well in that area. the tax increment from sales taxes has increased over the past several years. There are still some struggles with, again, going to the Columbine Square parcel. That's a big drawback to the area. Also, I think there was one or two comments regarding the election commission building. With that parcel.
Arapahoe County.
Or,
Arapahoe County.
yeah, Arapahoe County, yeah.
It is where they count.
Yeah. Trying to remember what else came out of that report. It was just, there were a couple things about internet infrastructure. Like I said, throughout the whole, when they add the questions, and we can get that report to you if it hasn't been provided to you. Yeah. Again, there really was no common theme. There were just maybe one or two had this concern, one or two had that, but all of them it just was nothing. You could just connect the dots and say, oh, this is one big thing we can try to address.
So I just wanted
But
to
the
say,
questions were quite broad.
I just wanted to mention,
Yeah.
well, go ahead, Bill.
Well, and Jerry, I don't think I can't sit here and say, here are the 5 items of history, here are the 5 of culture, and here are the 5 strengths. But those are the characteristics you try to be simpatico with when you do a new project.
Sure.
You try to make sure that you're not going to disrupt an existing neighborhood culture, have to respect its history, and also do it in a way that
And that's what I was wondering,
emphasizes
just what
its strengths.
for calling out
You know.
culture, I was just wondering what that culture is.
Yeah.
And I can imagine what the strengths are in the history, but I was wondering, I'm just curious as to what you guys are. My other question then, so the owners, would you say it's Suros? Is that the owner entity, or is that just?
The Chang family owns the property.
Right.
The Kairos, Kairos Investment Management Company handles the property on behalf of them.
So they're the managing agent? Then?
Yes.
Okay.
And Tina Lee just came on board with them, I think it was about 8 months ago. And this is one of the properties that is in her portfolio that she has to manage.
Cool. Thank you.
Kyle?
Just a question on that interactive map. Is that where does that reside? Is that public or is that on the website somewhere?
I believe it's public because Catherine,
I couldn't find it on the website.
Kathleen
Oh.
Osher?
yes, Kathleen did, prepared that for us. And she gave us the link and I think it's not on our website, it's on the city's.
What was the question, Kyle?
The interactive map of the URA. They had it on the first slide.
There's one where you
I'm right here.
see Bill down there. I wouldn't sit down there either.
We need to receive a link to the interactive map, and we also need to receive the full study that was done. What was it, EPS?
EPS.
Yes.
I thought we had that.
You paid for half of it.
You pay, yeah, you should have. Yeah, I would have thought you,
Yeah.
if not, I
Oh,
can,
yeah.
Yeah, that's what we have. Split the
Okay.
I can make sure with Kathleen that you have gotten it.
Other questions? Comments, questions? I have a couple questions. Do you know what is the full authority of Tina Lee?
I'm not sure, we had about a 45-minute conversation. She did share with me that they have been reaching out to developers for this property to get some suggested project scope. And they haven't gotten those back yet. This was a few weeks ago. It sounds like she has, she still has to go back to the gentleman you gave me, the owner, one of the owners of the firm.
Oh, John Vidal.
Johnny, yeah. But she made it seem like she's directed to deal with all the issues.
Is she a decision maker?
I don't know if she's a decision maker. Like I said, we had a 45-minute discussion and she's committed to get back to me the first week of November. Because she had another project she's busy with.
Sounded like she's a decision influencer, but I think Nadella and those people make the ultimate decision. So,
I wonder if, Tiffany, could you run some
just run through some of the numbers for us?
Sure. Any particular?
Well, one of the decisions that we need to make is, that we absolutely have to make by December, in December,
December 16th is when the loan
is when the loan. So we have to make a decision about what we wanna do on or before that date, so understanding the numbers a bit. And it seems too that there's some speculation about ongoing and the dollar amount that would come in from the TIF and what that could start to look like. If you could just kind of draw that out a little bit more.
Sure. So currently, the estimated amount that will be due on the loan on December 16th is $154,444 roughly. That's the original loan, 3 installments of $50,000 each, so a total of $150 plus the interest that's been.
That's the unrestricted? Yeah, okay.
So that's the amount of the loan that's gonna come due on December 16th. Just as reference, currently Lyft is holding, as of September 30th, $427,739, and that primarily is sales tax increment from the URA areas over the past few years, and any monies that are still remaining from the $150,000 loan that was provided to
Can you say that number again?
$427,739.
That includes the 154,444?
Yes, that's just their cash balance.
So the 150 is a subset of that.
Right, so if Lyft were to pay the full loan amount on December 16th, they would have $292,741 left, which essentially is, as I mentioned, sales tax increment.
Just a detail, and this is also maybe for Reed, if they paid the full amount back, then they would have no debt. Correct? They carry any other
Reads that
debt?
way.
Nice toss.
That is correct. I'm not aware of any other financial obligations that Lyft has taken on at this point in time.
And they are required to carry debt.
It's a discussion that we'll need to have, but generally speaking, I think even in our cooperative agreement, it says that if Lyft is not using the tax increment financing, and we'll talk specifically about sales tax increment financing, not deal with property tax increment financing, then they need to remit it to the city
First quarter.
the first quarter of the following year. Correct.
And that hasn't happened yet, ever.
I will say that the property taxes that were received by Lyft from the URA areas that were repealed have been refunded to those taxing entities. So the Lyft board did approve that.
So regarding the sales tax to the city then, are we keeping a running tally as what that should be since it started in 2014?
Yes, absolutely. We know exactly how much that amount is.
How much is it?
It depends on, let's see, which total. In total, it's been $382,109.
That's about what we are now.
What was the amount in 2019?
The amount in 2019 was $103,000. 102,957.
What's the alternative to not paying and the ramifications?
The ramifications of Lyft defaulting on the promissory note?
What I'm trying to get at, is there really a choice?
Well, I think there's the choice that in order for Lyft to keep the sales tax increment financing, they need to be servicing debt. So they actually need to have debt of some sort, whether that's bonds, whether that's promissory notes owed to the city. That's how Lyft can continue to maintain that fund balance to be used if and when a property owner with a developer comes along for a project that makes sense. One of the ideas could be that you could continue the note, extend the note, for a period of time. I will tell you that, I don't wanna get too deep into the weeds, but there are some other aspects of the promissory note that probably need to be addressed if indeed council decides to extend that note. Other areas in terms of being more definitive in terms of when Lyft would get the increment financing monies, when those monies would be due in terms of if they weren't using them. So in a short term, if the decision is to have Lyft continue on and keep the increment financing, would be to extend that note, at least even temporarily, while some of the other issues associated with that are refined by their outside counsel.
Got another question. Then, one of the comments that you've made in your report on, kind of starts on page 3 and goes over to page 4, is about kind of talking about what I can best surmise is sort of a feeling as though there may not have been the support coming from council and or staff, that the transition, the turnover that you've had on Lyft, the lack of an exec director has been, has not been made a positive impact on the group. You're making a request that we take a look at coordinating between council, planning, and Lyft. How do you see that? How do you envision that? What does that look like?
I'm not really sure, to tell you the truth. I don't think we really know. Part of it is, as a conversation with council is how does that legally work? That we work together on these projects, to figure out how this project coordination goes on. If a developer walks in tomorrow and says, here's a plan. We look at the financing part of it and we say, yeah, we support it. But then a year later or 9 months later, it doesn't go through planning, it doesn't go through city council, that would not be a win for anybody. So how do we prevent that from happening? I'm not really sure how that works. I just think there has to be more communication. I'm not sure how, the interaction I've had with other entities that have urban renewal, the city council is the urban renewal board. So they know what they want and they know what the discussions are. I haven't had a conversation with anybody that's set up like we are. I'm not advocating that it gets changed. I think, having more citizen involvement in the process is a good thing. I just don't know how we figure out how that gets coordinated, so at the end, there's a project that happens that everybody's happy with.
I don't think that's not meant as a criticism of what's the relationship has been in the past, because they've been set up autonomously. But as Kevin mentioned, we're all pretty new to this board, and we struggled administratively for a long time, trying to figure out what we're doing over the last couple of months. I think we've gotten our feet under us, and this has been identified as one of the things we need to do. Is if a project comes forward, we don't want to go all the way down the line without coordination with council and the community development department and such, and have it die at the end because we didn't anticipate something. We need to go down that path together, and we look to council to be the lead on that, because somebody has to be the lead. And you have authority over all those departments, and we don't. So
We
just
don't have authority over,
Well,
how
no.
does that work?
Well, you
No.
have authority, the attorney.
But ultimately, you make the decision if a project comes forward, if it lives or dies. And I think we're trying to be proactive here to figure out how do we make sure that at the end, the project gets through the process and we don't waste everybody's time, that city council says, why, it doesn't work. And again, I'm not saying it's not a criticism, it's a challenge. How do we figure that out? that at the end of the day, we have a project that everybody likes.
Not right
Maybe
now,
the P4.
in the future.
In the fourth, yeah.
Reed and then Kyle.
Sorry to make myself ex officio, but how I've seen it work in other jurisdictions which had a similar setup is the Urban Renewal Authority had a pretty close working relationship with, say, community development with the city manager, and was able to have a lot of correspondence with those, I guess, two different departments within the city to get a better, firmer handle on what the city would be supportive of, rather than getting all the way down the line, working with the developer and then finding out that it's something that council wouldn't want to do at all. Prior to an application being filed, it's not in a quasi judicial capacity, so there certainly could be outreach in terms of staff with council saying, is this something that would remotely entertain? And trying to head those bad ideas off, if they are bad ideas, before anyone's invested a lot of time and resources. So that's how I've seen it done.
There you have it. It's not a big deal, we just need to define it.
Kyle.
I was gonna say that's what the P4 process would kick in probably, and then it would be with your legal counsel having whatever contract you have with any developer, having any financing be contingent on all entitlements and permits and everything being approved, so.
Would that be specifically for reasons? Or would that be for any redevelopment? Some of it wouldn't need,
Some of
some
it
of it
would.
could
Depends on
not
what it
even
is,
show
yeah.
up
It
in
would
council.
depend on what it was.
Right. Corinne, did you, Sarah?
Well, I was going to mention the P4,
Okay.
and then,
Sketch plans.
right, so we have a system in place, don't we? Where that would come to, through the P4 process, we would see it long before we got to the stage you're describing as a crisis.
Like I said, we just need to have an understanding of how it works, because right now we don't.
So that's.
And it's just a dialogue between us to figure out how it.
Something has been missing that the lift board doesn't know that P4 exists. That's an important step.
Karina.
At the end of the day, urban renewal is just, it's another financing tool for a property owner and a developer. And so the property owner and developer goes through all of the, urban renewal is like the last 10%, right? It's not the other 90% that they're financing. And so it essentially it's the same process. The role of LIFT and the role of urban renewal is determining whether or not the project that's being presented meets the criteria of whether it's light or amenity or value to the community that you can justify saying we'd be willing to invest in this project. And so it's not a different process. The property owner or the developer would still go, if it is a rezoning or otherwise, they'll go through P4 if they choose, or planning and community development. And really the decision of LIFT is whether or not they want to support that incremental financial contribution to the project. Now, the tying it to, the city values, I think we are in a much better place. That's why we push so hard for the comprehensive plan, and we do have the Bellevue corridor vision as well. So we are much further along in giving an indication of what the community would be supportive of there that we never had before. So I really do think it's just, let property owners or developers bring it forward. It's hard for a board to say, okay, let's develop Columbine Square this way. I don't think that should be your directive. But I was, some of these smaller projects, I think maybe through that feedback, you can begin to identify, maybe there wasn't a common theme, but maybe this one could really use a better sidewalk or a better crosswalk to the pool and the park that's there. That I'm a little concerned that we wait just for Columbine Square, and while that's the pain point for everything, it doesn't mean that's the only project that is viable and should be supported.
This is a question, Madam Mayor. Can we use urban renewal funds to do other than servicing debt? Can we use it for sidewalks and things like that?
Public infrastructure.
If it
It
relates
has
to
to be
the
for the
property.
public, it has to be
It's
in
gotta
the
relate
area.
to the property.
To the
Has to be
project.
itself
It
Somehow,
has to
yeah.
be in the
Somehow,
urban
so-
renewal area.
So if we don't have a project, and we don't, then can we build sidewalks
Around the property, talking about-
around the property, even though there's no project?
You can do beautification plan areas, so you can do public infrastructure improvements.
Around the property, even though there's no project?
If I-
Okay, that's important for us to clarify, because that's been a
Good point.
questionable issue for quite a while.
Yeah, Rickman, I just wanted to answer your question as well. That's why there are the two options that are described, one being we wait for and work with the developer, the other being direct infrastructure investment. We use the money, consulting with our legal counsels, use the money to directly do a project that council and everybody else thinks would help to alleviate the blight there, to the extent that we have that power. So if we feel like it's going to be more time than we think we can handle for a developer to come, or a developer coming along might not even want to use urban renewal, nevertheless, we might be able to alleviate blight through a direct project. And so that's something, the reason we broke those two options out, they're not discrete. I mean, they are discrete, they're not exclusive. You can choose both, you can choose neither. But we wanted to call that out precisely for that reason.
Jerry?
Yeah, and I think in your most recent, the EPS report, it calls out a lot of options.
Yes.
So it's not like we're dead in the water. So there's a lot of options there that we can do. I do have a question though, because I know you were saying when you're struggling without board members basically, because we were talking as we walked in, how many meetings we canceled in 2016 versus now. You're not canceling meetings, which is great. Appreciate every one of you guys on that board. I know it's tough. So did we finally get some processes in place? I know back when you were there, Kyle, you guys were working on processes and things. Did we finally wrap that up so that when someone does come, that you have a process? And as I was saying, that P4, that would be crucial if there's any doubt about something, that P4 would be very helpful.
We started that, we took what the previous lift board had put together, and as we reviewed it, we had a committee, we still have a committee that was reviewing that and starting to propose changes to that would fit the needs that we have today. That was kind of put on hold when we started this, figuring out what our next steps really should be. So that is one of the next steps, is to continue that work to really make sure we have a solid process in place that if a developer were to come forward, either within the Columbine URA or within another URA if a future council decides to undertake one, that we have something in place that we can hand them and say, okay, here's where we start.
Good. And my other one is for Tiff then. So I know that they've refunded the property taxes to Littleton, Arapahoe, South Suburban, Urban Renewal. Have they done the city as well on the property tax? So on the sales tax, that's the piece that has not been refunded to anybody. Is that right?
And they've only collected or received sales tax from Littleton.
The others, yeah, they don't have sales tax, so and that was what you said, about 380K.
In total, that's what they've received.
Kyle?
Oh, no.
Guys, I don't think this is any secret, but one of the frustrating parts, of course, of what we're trying to do with Columbine Square is the lack of responsiveness from the owners. They lead us on. Last time I had a conversation 6-7 months ago, we were gonna have something within 2 months that they thought the city would like. One of the things that the neighborhood really wants is for that property to be gone down to the ground, taken down to the ground. So could it be an option to use any lift funds to take the fence down, to take it down to earth, down to the ground and do an overseed on it?
It's not ours.
It's not ours, but
Property owner.
if the property, if Tina came together and said, that would be a huge plus in my opinion for the city, for everybody. Now we can just relax and it's not such an ugly sight. And I've already gotten confirmation from planning that they would not require retention ponds. I think I've told you guys. So they said as long as it's not a hard surface, we're gonna be okay. And that was one of their big concerns, the owner.
So one of the discussions we had, and I can't remember, I'm trying to remember who it was we had it with. That was an option, where we go in and have some sort of conversation and give them maybe a financial incentive to do that. And maybe it was somebody with EPS said, if you develop a park-like atmosphere there, you will never get anything else there, and a developer won't wanna do it.
They told us in the comp plan too.
You know, so that's gonna be the challenge with that. I think, you know, if they were to pull up all those slabs and plant grass
I'm
and
not saying plant grass, I
Or
want
even-
a field, right?
just a field, even that field the residents in that neighborhood would say, now they see that as a plus, as a park, and not a piece of private property that would be very hard for a developer to come in and do something with later.
I mean,
I-
another 2 years, 5 years, you know, I mean, they've been leading us on, this has been empty for 4, 5 years now. And so it's unfortunate we don't have any.
The impression that I got from Tina, and she's new with the firm, is one of the things that they seem to be struggling is what does the city want there? And I directed her to.
Do not even.
Well, I don't know, I have not had to, you know, I don't know what
Give your
conversation.
number.
I don't know, I don't know what discussions she's had with her leadership, don't know, I'm just taking at face value the conversation. I steered her towards the Envision Littleton plan and the Bellevue Corridor plan and saying, this is what the city wants.
Has she reached out to community development? Because that would be her logical next step.
Well, that's, in November,
Doesn't
that's,
make sense. This does not make sense.
Well,
I understand your frustration. I mean, I got somebody who actually returned my phone call, I had a very lengthy conversation. It was a very positive, I thought, conversation that, you know, the first week of November, we'll see if I get a phone call or an email saying, hey, how do we start this discussion?
Just start, just go
Right.
Let's go.
so yeah,
Wouldn't it be safer for Tina Lee to be talking to community development rather than talking to the lift board? Because, this
Lisbon,
makes me really nervous.
that's her first step.
I mean, the pressure I was getting from people was.
No, we understand,
We
Kevin.
understand
No,
that.
Yeah,
I'm saying let's not do any more.
And my thought was, once I did not want to be the only person having a discussion with her.
We don't want you to be the
As
only
usual,
person
Kevin.
having the
as
discussion.
usual, Kevin, you're just a tool.
Jerry.
Oh, Jerry. That's
No, Kevin,
I plan on, getting
You
with
got
the
a
city
person
manager.
who answers
and
the phone, you have a person that answers the phone, that's a big step. You were talking about how you work this in, and that would be a next step. We don't need to go deep into next steps here, and council needs to have a conversation about if we want to put together what next steps, really are. But I think that there's the opportunity that you have reached out to someone, how we get this thing lined up in a better format. Karina, I'll let you go, and then I've got one last wrap up. On the bill.
So, I completely appreciate that you guys are volunteers, right? So some of this is a challenge because you don't have an executive director to just kind of keep pushing. What I would like to see perhaps is, for this direct infrastructure investment, do you have maybe a short list of some ideas, or maybe looking back at the plans that we do have in place for Bellevue Corridor, now even our transportation maybe master plan. Maybe look at some of what we already have in other parts of our organization, to say what could qualify under lift financing for infrastructure. If we can get a short list of that, at least we have that, we have another option that we're ready to act on. And so we're not, it doesn't sound like you're putting all your eggs in one basket. And I do like that you pointed out this is separate. So, having that list would be good for us to have, and that might be enough to say, let's just move down that path.
I think some of the.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. No, I think some of the challenges, I think there are some things there that we could do. we would just have to explore how it gets financed, because the current money we have would not be enough to cover any one project that was in the Bellevue Corridor plan for that area. So there would have to be a partnership with the city to figure out how we finance that.
So the first start, and where I'm going with this, is if we start with that list, for example, we can apply for grants with DRCOG, or especially when we're talking about roads or sidewalks or mobility, you don't have to do it alone. You should not do it alone, but you're another contributing partner, and that's what it takes to do those things.
Bill?
I wanted to address Jerry's piece on process. We kind of went down that route a little bit, and Jack put a lot of effort into getting an application together and all that. But then this was part of our kind of evolutionary struggle as we went through the early phases of this, is that, do we really want to go through all that process definition if we don't know they're going to come to the table? We assume if they come to the table, if these talks mature, that we'll have enough warning to develop an application and define that. It's well defined in other jurisdictions. If, on the other hand, we do infrastructure, that's a totally different process. And we work with REIT and community development to develop those processes there. So, but I just like to emphasize that we've made, I think, a lot of progress in terms of finding Columbine Square, how we will work with that, getting in contact, getting the alternative solution with the infrastructure in the local area. Financing, Jack did some good work on financing. And we have a $154,000 loan, and we can lever, 2.7 is maximum kind of in there. But just by comparison, the city of Denver did what I'd call a small urban renewal project that had a lot of impact, and that's taking the old Bonfils and Lowenstein theaters and converting that into the tattered cover bookstore. And the total amount of money that went into that from urban renewal was less than $4 million. And so we have the ability to lever in other places, and maybe town hall needs that someday, maybe something up there, but it's a powerful tool to do things that don't come out of the city budget. And we just think that can be applied effectively as we move down the road. And I think we're now learning kind of what we can do and how we can work through the process. And we just like to be able to do that. So.
Well, certainly appreciate the work that you put into this and the report. I think that you guys obviously, you're showing that, to me at least, it really does feel like you really want to make this work, that you've got some ideas beyond the big green fence. I think it also shows some opportunities that we may not have thought about, but I also think it's still full of a lot of challenges, and a lot of those are because it is such a small area. We're at year 18, isn't it 18?
5 zones away.
Yeah, 18's left. 18 years are left on the authority. So
It's less exciting every year.
I thought it was like 19 or 20. This is year 5 of the loan.
Yeah, but by the time you get a project going.
Yeah, I mean, it may be, with a project, if.
So the clock is ticking,
Right,
so
the clock is
there's
ticking.
part of the challenge we're dealing with too. So I think that this is excellent. I appreciate that, obviously, the thought and the work that you guys put into this. We will have a great discussion about it at our study session on the 8th and then make a decision. You guys are welcome to come to the study session. We won't have you at the table for our discussion. Just it's kind of our rules. But we may be, and I would encourage if council has any additional questions for anybody on the board or needs any more information, we'll run that through the city manager, have them create that communication back and forth so that everybody gets all the answers and questions back. So there may be something as we're noodling through this that we didn't think to ask. So is there anything else you guys would like to close with?
No, I just think this is, I mean, we've laid out, what we've done and what, we see the future and what we still have to work on. We still think it can be a force for change in the area, and we'd like to continue to work towards that goal.
Debbie, I'm good, thank you. Cindy?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, we talked a little bit about the beginning, how we're all new to this, and it's taken some time for us to start working together, and we are working together, and I mean, it's been new to me, I've only been on it like 2 years, so the learning curve for me was big, and I think for several of us it was, but it's just been gratifying to see in the last 6 months or so how we've been able to really say, and maybe it's because you work good on a deadline.
Deadlines are good motivators.
We really had to kind of get everything in a going, and we needed to make sure that we moved forward and got to the deadline, and I think it made us all work together really well. So we're gelling right now, and so we're in a good shape, and I just wanted to say I appreciate everybody.
And I think you guys are the right team. You guys are a good fit, and I think you do have it. This needs to be our showcase. We were talking about that earlier. This needs to be our showcase, because any other time we do this, we gotta go to the citizens for a vote. So we need to make this one work, and we need to do it right, whether it's paying back sales tax, whatever. But man, we're counting on you guys to pull it off.
We'll discuss it, and then get back to you guys for certain. Thank you so much, appreciate all the work.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Cindy.
Thanks. So, we'll go ahead and move on to our next topic. Give you guys a few minutes to sit.
They checked if you'd like to use my name. More than all. Thank you. Thanks, Jason.
Of the potential Arts and Culture Commission, name is still to be determined. But this is really an outcropping, council, of when we had the Fine Arts Board at a study session, and they talked about some of the challenges and some of their opportunities, and we became somewhat engaged in some of the interesting things that they were interested in doing. And then I think followed by that, not too far, was then our interviews that we do with our boards and commissions. And we always find it so fascinating when we're interviewing boards and commission applicants, how many of them come in with just some really amazing ideas and some great creativity. And I think that council kind of, I think there was kind of a synergy or an energy around that this was an important thing, and we wanted to kind of highlight it somehow. And it really, I think, came to full fruition simultaneously while we were working on the comp plan, and how much input we got from the community in terms of those things, and how important of those features are for the community. We also kind of recognize that we've got arts and culture and history kind of sprinkled throughout Littleton, and they're just not a real dotted line, there's not a real cohesion. So what would that start to look like? Well, we do have existing boards who are operating under those different categories. So I had reached out to Councilmember Elrod about the potential opportunity of creating this Arts and Culture Commission. And this was sort of simultaneous to us also were looking at the lodging tax, which I think we all agree that had we gone forward with that, we would have had, the money would have been designated towards arts, culture, tourism, that type of thing. There was kind of a a thought.
I don't think we ever agreed on that.
I think that, well, I think
Some
we
people
had a
discussed it.
conversation, yeah, and it seemed to be a popular way to go.
Some people discussed it. As a group, we didn't discuss it, and we didn't agree.
Okay, we didn't agree. So, but I think that what we did agree on is that if in fact we were to pursue a lodging tax for that, there would need to be a designation for that. And the community would need to know what that designation is in order to better support it. And also because we would want the hotel industry to help support that too. So that was important. And this kind of all just sort of happened all at the same time. Now, well, it's not all at the same time now. We're not going for the lodging tax this year. There's an opportunity for council to discuss that again in 2020. But I think the rest of it really did gain some speed and gain some encouragement, gain some thought. And so working with Kate Epple, who is chairman of the Fine Arts Board, Tim, Abby joined us in these conversations, Karina, myself. I think Randy was there, and we had a number of conversations about what could this start to look like? What would be the foundational structure? What would the charter look like? What would this group do? Why would they do it? What's the scope of work? What would be the outcome? If we're starting something new, there has to be some direction. So this is really a culmination of those conversations, and I'll turn it over to Tim. That's just kind of setting up why we're here and why we're talking about this now. So Tim?
Thank you, Mayor Brinkman, and members of council. I'm joined at the table by Fabi Hilliard and Dennis Bergfeld, who are two of our consultants that we've been working with from DJC and Associates. Okay. I mangle that every other time I try to do it. So, but we're happy to be here with you tonight, and I can tell you that I think we're all very excited to be sort of the first ones out of the blocks to build on the momentum from last week's unanimous approval of the comprehensive plan. So we really think, having gone through that process and worked with Kathleen considerably, that this dovetails very nicely with the goals that were established and placed in the Heritage, Arts, Recreation, and Tourism section of the comprehensive plan. So we think that this is an opportunity to really encourage and build on existing quality of life assets, the things that are part of what makes Littleton Littleton. And I think we all would agree that we have some wonderful assets. I think we would all admit in that community that we tend to be fairly siloed in how we do things. So our approach on this has been to look for things that we might be able to do. I know that this was born out of a conversation originally on the lodging tax. Certainly that may be something that council directs the commission to look at. We also see some substantial benefits, and these again are drawn from the goals of the comp plan. I will read through those, but I will just say that in addition to that, we see some distinct opportunity. One, to build the public-private partnerships that all the comp plan speaks to. We can look at collaboration, we can look at coordination, cross-promotion I think is a real opportunity, and really just improving communication within the arts and culture community here in Littleton. We have representation in our community, obviously from the public side with our library and museum, Town Hall Arts Center, more on the private side, plenty of nonprofits, and then a lot of small businesses, private enterprise that I think could also have a seat at the table. So we're excited about the possibility of building this and really extending beyond what the Museum Board, Library Board, and Fine Arts Board are already doing. To me, obviously, this seems fairly straightforward, but as the finance director reminds me every year when I submit my budget request, I'm often wildly optimistic. So a couple of house cleaning items. The mayor mentioned the name. I know that there have been some things kicked around about commission or board. We talked this morning about potentially a council. The city attorney and I visited a little bit this morning about the differences between boards and commissions. I don't know that we landed on a very good definition of either of them, but certainly I think council's prerogative as to what naming application goes through. I did want to emphasize though two I think important things to keep in mind. There is no budget request with this formation of the Littleton Arts and Culture whatever. We have money in the museum budget. Mark and I had a very extensive conversation about exactly what we could do within existing budgets in 2020. We had some money already earmarked for a couple of projects that would actually make more sense to do after we've gone through this process and see what this Arts and Culture Commission develops into. So that money is earmarked for this project if council decides to move forward with it. So no revenue asked, which always makes Tiffany happy.
Expenditure, you mean?
Correct, that's exactly it, yes. No expenditure. There's also no staffing request for this. My team and I have worked out a plan where we can absorb it within library and museum. I'll be the lead staff representative for the commission and probably work most extensively with it. My deputy director, Nancy Trim, will take on some items if I need to reallocate time. She'll also probably be the lead representative for the library, and then Jenny Hankinson, who's our curator of collections on the museum side, and his staff liaison to the Fine Arts Board, will be the lead on the museum side. So we really feel that we can take care of most of the responsibilities within my department. We do realize, though, that we're going to need to be able to reach outside that and look at other city departments. So I've already visited with Kelly Nardi, our communications director for the city. She's very excited about getting engaged in the process, and certainly with her and her team's expertise in communications and marketing, I think that would be critical to have them with a seat at the table as well. And we will be fortunate to be joined at the table by our consultants. I know Fatty's going to tell you a little bit about her background in this area, and then talk a little bit about the national and regional things that we've seen, and then I'll bring back some discussion about more of a local flavor.
Now?
It's all yours.
So, thank you for having us tonight, and this is really a very exciting moment. I had the fortune of being one of the first directors of the Mayor's Office of Art, Culture, and Film in Denver when that office was created. And the biggest thing that did, which this sort of formalization, which is in front of you tonight, does, is it allows the industry, the arts industry, to really leverage its value across the whole city. Inside the city and outside the city. So I was the director of that office for 6 or 7 years. I then moved on to being the director of theaters and arenas, where we did the expansion of the convention center, the auditorium theater, and the new visitor center at Red Rocks. And then I've had the opportunity to work with a number of other communities, Castle Rock, and we're doing some work currently down in Elizabeth, with other communities who have recognized the value of the arts and what the arts bring to the community, both from a lifestyle and a community value point of view, as well as a genuine economic benefit from leveraging it. When you look at the investments that you as a community already make in the arts, which is substantial, to formalize that relationship and to acknowledge that universal investment will really allow you to leverage those public-private partnerships, look at different ways that the investment can be partnered inside the city, pull all of the information into one central location, as well as, obviously, from a branding and an identification point of view, community identity, it becomes a really high point. So I think it's an excellent time. The way you have connected it with your vision, your neighborhood and community vision plan is remarkable, and you are certainly well positioned to take the next steps quite successfully, I hope.
We really think one of the things that we have going for us is something that many communities don't, and that's community attachment. That's something we're not going to have to work to find here in Littleton. One of the things that comes through loud and clear with each one of the resident surveys that are done every 2 years is, one, the level of importance that our our community members assign to our cultural amenities, and we picked 7 out of those recent resident survey. But the nice thing about this is that if you look at all the cultural amenities, the numbers are quite high in terms of how they rate their importance of our services. Even more, I think, important is how our residents consistently rank our quality of services. So if you want to look at the orange bar as sort of expectations on the part of our citizens, the green bar would represent what we're delivering to them at this point. So there is already a high appreciation for the value of culture, of arts and culture across the board in Littleton. our citizens feel an actual personal investment in all of our entities, I think. We certainly see that every day at the library and museum. So this is one of the things that I think we really can build on successfully. And I mean, ultimately, the question then becomes, what are you looking for this commission to accomplish? I think there are a number of things. I talked a little bit about just the ability to have greater communication, have a considerably more coordination. We've also looked at specific things, and you'll see some of these on the board, some of the opportunities to really mine some data, I think, that's out there and build a plan going forward for Littleton. I think ultimately Pat described it as a holistic arts and culture plan for the community is something that would benefit all of us and allow us to plan more strategically going forward. So, fairly short and sweet, but I did, I guess what I would leave you with this is that certainly my department is more than happy, in fact excited to be able to have an opportunity to work on this if council chooses to go down this path. I guess what our ask this evening would be just a direction from council to move forward with writing a resolution and bring that to the council for deliberation next month.
Carol, you said that you were going to fund it through the existing museum budget. How much from that budget would go to this, and what would not be purchased or covered instead?
Excellent question. It wouldn't impact any programming or any potential acquisitions that we were already looking at. One of the major areas that we would divert funding from, we had planned to do a full year of strategic planning with the Fine Arts Board. That was kind of already in the budget plan for next year. Obviously, the emergence of this as a topic of discussion, it makes a lot more sense for us to defer that conversation until after this commission discussion is completed, so that we can, again, as we look at this commission dovetailing with the comprehensive plan, we would want the Fine Arts Board strategic plan to dovetail with the commission, fit in, find areas where that would make sense. So that's the primary area that we're going to be diverting some money, and that's about $15,000.
$15,000, that would be the extent of what you plan to spend.
No, we've got probably another $10,000. I think Mark and I have looked at about $25,000 we've got in the museum and library budget combined that we move towards this. And none of it would divert from programming or acquisitions of any sorts. It would be primarily planning money that we're looking at.
And what would that money be spent on then by the commission?
Well, that's a good question. We don't know that it would be spent by the commission. We would obviously be retaining our consultants to work with us and help us guide the process. I think that would be the
How much for that?
We have not gone beyond this initial contract with them, so this phase gets us through this process with council, and that was $8,000, I believe, if I remember correctly. So we would be looking at probably 2 more phases next year, council member.
Thank you.
And if I might add, some of the work that we have already done is work that will carry over. In other words, there's stuff that has been done already in preparation for this that would impact that. Good point.
Tim, how does this tie in with the other commissions for the library or the museum commission?
I think they really have 2 separate missions, Pat. I mean, and the way I would look at it is that the museum board and the library board and fine arts board to some extent are primarily tactical. They're looking at the day-to-day responsibilities that they have. For instance, library board works with us on any censorship issues. Museum board works with us, with staff on any deaccessioning with accreditation and things of that sort. The Fine Arts Board obviously has their role as acquiring public art. To me, the role of this commission would be far more strategic. It would be looking at a more comprehensive plan for arts and culture in the city. I think that would encompass most of their time in this initial period that we're looking at. I think it's largely going to be an inventory of current arts and culture assets. We've got to start on that, but it's just a start. I think there'd be a lot of that piece of it, and then figuring out the best way forward so that there's more coordination, more communication, and opportunity for advocacy.
And Pat, that was a question that we, in the group, we really molded over. Would this be a replacement board or commission, or would this be in lieu of? And then do we have too many? And is there too much redundancy or overlap? And so I think what we really settled on was on the structure, there would be there would be a voting member from each of those three boards. So those boards would be represented. And that there would be an opportunity as this progressed, year 2 or year 3, if we see it growing into something that it needs to change or that the other boards need to change, that we have that option to, bring it back to council and say, okay, this is what's happening and this would be more efficient and kind of organize that. Because once this board, if approved, there's actually representatives from entities that there's business and other partnerships, so it's not gonna look like our other boards. And their responsibility is gonna be a little bit more heavy lifting to move this thing through. So who knows what it'll look like, but I think that at this point, the other three boards will be supported.
And I think that's a really good observation, Mayor, because one of the things I think that will make this very distinct from our other boards and commissions is the fact that in the initial charter, we call out for a first structure, as Debbie said, representatives from each of the each of the advisory boards, library, museum, and fine arts, but then we also have 4 representatives from local arts and culture organizations. Those could be nonprofits, they could be other governmental entities if that's an option, and then we ask for 2 business representatives from the business community as well. So it really would be kind of a cross-pollination.
We've got a startup period in here that they're staggering 3-year thing, so there's a way that if things start to go wacky, we can adjust this very quickly and not disrespect the work of citizens and partners. Kyle?
Yeah, I had 3 things. The first one kind of goes into the other boards. It looks like there's those 3 ex officio members from library, museum, and fine arts. We'd have to.
They actually wouldn't be ex officio.
You can be ex officio and a voter. Ex officio just means you're on that based on the position you hold. So they are ex officio.
Who knows Latin?
We had a discussion before about having people serve on 2 boards. I don't know where that ended, if we ever had a resolution with that or policy, but that would just be something to discuss. I'm not saying I'm against it, it's just something to bring up.
You're talking about, may I ask a question are you talking the people be on 2 boards or commissions with having a representative from one board be on another one?
2 people on 2 boards. A single person serving on 2 boards.
As a voting member.
As the.
We've just had discussion. I don't know if we had resolution about that, had a policy, so we just need to follow up.
That's something that we do now.
Yes. The other thing, since this commission doesn't oversee funds, in the charter, I would like to see a little bit more about providing recommendations to council or some other objectives of how they do that. 'Cause since it just seems reading through this, it looks more like it's cheerleading for the most part.
That's exactly what I got.
Just where is the actual? What's the root of this thing here is to provide recommendations to council to implement something rather than if they're not in charge of funds, the only board on here would be fine arts that actually has.
I think that's a really good point, and we kicked that around somewhat too. And initially, obviously, we don't have any money in the 2020 budget. If council wanted to direct this commission to be more active in that area, I think that's absolutely true. We do call for them to make recommendations to city council. But yeah, we can be more explicit about that. I think that's a very good point.
So we have it as I just want to clarify your ask there, because there is a bullet that says review and make recommendations to city council that facilitates these policies. That's one of the objectives. Are you looking for something?
Where is the? Oh, at the very bottom.
Page 1. Because again, the intent is that it is a recommending body.
Yeah. I must have just skipped that one line there, but yeah.
But Kyle, I think your point.
I wasn't looking up ex officio.
I think your point though about tying it to funding is legitimate. So we can certainly look at the language there.
And then the last third one is since this is dealing with tourism, I think there needs to be some mention and involvement with the communications department.
Yeah, we absolutely will. I had lunch with Kelly last week and we talked pretty extensively about that. She definitely is interested in being engaged.
Trina?
Peggy, if you have I have a comment, not a question, so if you have a question, go ahead.
Well, I had a couple of observations. Go ahead.
You know, coming back to the structure and the questions around, you know, the existing museum board, et cetera. And as we said, the boards as they exist now are very discrete and, you know, have the specific directive for that entity that they're supporting. And I think that's, you know, what this is intended to do, and that's why the structure is actually much more diversified to include the businesses as well as the boards, as well as other entities, is because really the goal and intent of this particular commission is to be able to reach much broader across the community and tie all these pieces together so that they don't all work independently. So it really is about the philosophy of, you know, high tides raises all boats type of thing. And that's why we really deliberated a lot about really pushing for other entities to come in, like the business community, because it's not just for one particular entity. It's community-wide.
So just as an example of the kinds of leverage a unified organization like this can do. So for example, in Denver, if you have something like the Monet Show, if you have a commission who's coordinating with other arts organizations, maybe there's music of the same era and theater of the same era and fashion of the same era and photography of the, you know, it becomes a comprehensive community-wide experience that everybody then benefits from this one blockbuster that came in. And it's that kind of conversation, recommendation, coordination, which is leveraging and conversing about what the possibilities of partnership across these lines look like. It isn't about forcing resources or changing resources. It's about let's allocate them all together, and if the whole community can come up, if we focus on this for this 6 months, then let's do that. And it seems to take a group of diversified arts-related, business-related, community, education, all the sectors of the community together to bring those ideas forward and have the depth of reach across the community to make those kinds of ideas gel.
So we can have Tim promise that he'll bring a Van Gogh or Banksy show to the museum, so we can do that to one-up Denver, so that's what I'm hearing, right, Tim?
I don't promise.
So Denver, Littleton, you know, it's all.
Can I
Well,
answer
you never
that?
know, you know.
You never know.
One of the, if you start as I do, from the premise that arts and culture provide significant value to a community, and that's not just making you feel good or going to see Monet, but the economic impact of arts and culture is significant, and there's a lot of studies that indicate that. So you've got a community, and everybody says, yeah, we really want this, but somebody's got to step up and take the leadership role. At some point, some entity has to become the leader of the process. Otherwise, everybody's going down their own road. Well, I'm going to support this because I like this, or I'm going to support this, and the business community needs to be. So what we have seen as we have tried to put this together is to say that this is the entity that could take that leadership role for the city of Littleton to not only bring those disparate elements together, but have everybody driving forward at the same time to raise all boats at the same time.
So, a couple of comments. Number one, well, I like this idea in general, so nobody get their hackles up with what I'm going to say. I think this community already has an incredible arts and culture. I mean, incredible, in part because of the museum, the library, this other special events kind of thing. It's incredible. I do wonder why we would need to have people outside the city, or want outside people. Yeah, I like outside people, but I think we have an incredible number of people to draw from in this city who would be wonderful on this. I don't particularly want to have in there letting somebody outside the city be in. It's not hostility to them, it's just they're not in the city. So anyway, that's one piece in there. And I do have a question. In the structure, in the first sentence, it says, the members, non-voting members, which initially may include. Well, if it initially may include, that says nothing about ongoing. It just seems to me the initial ought to come out of there, and just have, say where we want these people to come from. And then, if this is an arts and culture commission, I have to go for an edit here. I don't think we want to build community support, we want to cultivate community support. This is not a brick and mortar thing we're cultivating.
Agriculture.
So that's pardon?
They're not farming, it's not agricultural either.
Not that kind. Anyway, so.
Live for being semantic.
I like this idea.
Okay, one thing, Peggy, I think, and you probably saw it, that the members either need to reside in Littleton or have an organization operating within. So for example, someone from Hudson Gardens, if we wanted to have Rich on the board, he doesn't live in Littleton, but he runs Hudson Gardens, or if we wanted to have Mr. White on the board, he's on the foundation, and they don't live in Littleton, we still felt that because of the presence that they have and the impact that they have in the community, that and the value they would bring to the board was important. So I don't know if that helps you.
Are there people connected with those, I'm fairly certain, who could bring something from them and beyond this?
I'm with you, I'm fine with
Okay.
how it's set up.
Yeah, and that was, really what we were trying to drive to is that it's, again, it's not just, it's the citizens, it's the businesses, it's the organizations that all are and contribute to being able to cultivate arts and culture, and they are a driver of arts and culture in the community already. So that, again, to Debbie's point is, even if the individual that may be appointed is not a resident of Littleton, they are strongly affiliated with an organization that is a critical element to arts and culture in the city.
Jerry?
Did you ask, you started out saying the question is, or they asked is, do you want to do a resolution and bring it forward at this time? Is that what you asked?
We would look at bringing forward, writing a resolution, and bringing it to you in November. I think Mark had looked at November 19th on the tentative calendar for council to consider it.
Okay. I'm not opposed to this. I mean, I read it and it was definitely a sales pitch to make it happen. But I understand it, I agree with it and all that kind of stuff. I guess what I'm concerned with, just as Carol didn't even ask me questions, there's too many unknowns at this point. We just don't know. And so you said you have room in your budget now, so that means, so if we vote this down, are we gonna trim your budget?
I would say no.
Okay.
Well, I assume you expect me to say no, but no, obviously if council decided they didn't want to pursue this, we'd go back to the initial plan, which was to do the strategic planning for fine arts.
We increased your budget a little bit this year.
I think you cut it, if I remember.
So I guess my point, I'm a little bit worried about, right now we have too many unknown costs. We need to know those first. And that would be very helpful for me at least, because I don't want to.
And I don't think you're wrong, Jerry. I think part of the question is exactly, we don't know entirely what direction council want us to go with this. We know that there's going to be a fairly substantial ramp up for a new board and commission. To address one of Councilmember Cole's concerns about the word initially in there, we wanted to give flexibility to the new organization and to any future councils that came forward. One of the first things that they'll do, as any of our boards and commissions do, is write bylaws that would guide how theirs.
I guess the other part that I was getting on to about not knowing the cost right now, I'm really worried about budget creep. You know, that's what budget's gonna, this is gonna be for free, it's not gonna cost anything, we're in great shape. Year 3 or 4, we're adding staff, now we're doing things, so I am a little worried about budget creep. I would like a long-term plan, a business plan almost, of what it would take.
I think we were thinking that would be really an important first step of the commission, if that's what it ends up being call, is to look at that, is to set some goals and then put some dollars to the goals. What are the next steps? What are the 3 most important things to do? What are those funding sources? And it wouldn't necessarily be, part of their mandate would be to look for funding sources other than just the city, in terms of leveraging those economic partnerships that could exist and do exist from community business partners. But I think you're right. I think that becomes the first thing the board needs to do. We were thinking initially that if you have a new organization, that you might do a bit of sort of high-level curriculum meetings where you had people come in and talk about different kinds of aspects and how other organizations have or have not, mistakes made or not made, that kind of thing, to give people an idea of the kinds of things that can get done, to talk about the leveraging, to talk about the inventorying of the resources that the city already spends on the arts, and how can that be better managed, or can that be better managed, to get an idea of the lay of the land, and then in conjunction with the vision that you've created in your vision, comprehensive vision plan, to start to think, where do we want this to be in 10 years? What do we want this to look like? What do we want this to look like? Do we want a robust public art program? How do we feel about events and festivals? What is the appetite of the community for what aspects of arts and culture do we need to support, augment, encourage, and really do some investigative work from a community point of view is what's the next best path? What are the next best things to do? At which point I think you can, in fact, put that kind of a budget together and then look realistically at what are the funding sources, what's reasonable.
And Fabi, I think there's the other part to Jerry's concern about how much we spend, but there is this even larger opportunity about the economic driver that arts and culture is for a community. And there's a lot of information that we received in the packet that shows what arts and culture bring into a community in terms of revenue and resources and stuff like that. So balancing those out and showing here's the opportunity, and I think that having both of those visuals would be helpful.
My point is, Tim, is I need real numbers, not just I don't know numbers.
One of the things we really talked about in the run-up conversations, because the composition of this commission would be considerably, at least somewhat different than a lot of our others, we would not want to look at exclusively city funding to drive it. So we did want to look at seed money.
See, that's the kind of stuff I need to know. I mean, you can tell me that right now. I need to read it and study it. We have a fine arts board loaded with talented people, and they're very, passionate about what they do. I would start with them. What they can put together something for us. We need to know more. You guys are already in the loop. I'm not.
Sure.
I need to learn more about this.
Yeah, we can work on putting together something that's more numbers driven for the council packet for the 19th.
Well, and I think that if we think about, the Next Gen group and the Transportation Mobility Board, these are new boards that we created. We're learning as we go with all of them, and I don't think that there's, I think that the opportunity with all of our new boards is to start where we start and grow from that and understand and figure things out as we move along, because the value that comes back is exponentially more than anything else. And I wonder too on this, if there's not an opportunity to just be very clear about, if you've got $25,000 and we've got the year 2020, where does that go? I mean, Fabi's work would be included in that. Is there printing for invitations for a show we don't know about yet? Or those just to be, and maybe you would only spend $10,000, I don't know. But if there was exactly what you believe would be expenses, so that would be clear.
Budget creep is exactly the phrase I was looking for. I would like to see in whatever resolution or proposal we get, that there be an element in there that talks about there is an intent that this board, commission, whatever, will not be coming back to council asking to be funded. In order to give it the imperative to look broader for grants, partnerships, other ways of funding what it does. Because arts and culture is an interest of some of our population, but by no means an interest to all of our population. So it's a, I don't know how big the slice is, I'd be interested in seeing that, how big the slice is.
Are you done? Oh, I'm
Go
sorry,
ahead.
I was just.
Do you wanna talk?
Oh,
Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. I just think that's, I think we can look back at that, and I wouldn't necessarily like to see that type of verbiage in there, because we can look back in 2 years and say, look at what we've done with this group, and look at what they brought into the city, and look at the dollar amount. So I think there is a value to it, that we can't be so definitive to say, either fight or flight. That's just my opinion on that comment.
Well, there's definitely value to it. It's just
Well,
like
yeah,
Kyle with his,
no question.
when he came with his young youth initiative plan. It took, 2 or 3 times before he really came up with it. But it also, staff came back and said it wasn't going to cost extra time on staff other than preparing some reports. I'm hearing this is gonna cost.
I'm hearing this is gonna cost too.
Well, this is a resolution that the council can change over time. This isn't something that cannot be revisited. I'm not hearing cost. I know that we're going to be working with them. I mean, we're not talking about that we're gonna be bringing Monet to Littleton, or that we're gonna be bringing, that we wanna buy a $100,000 piece of art. I mean, none of that has, and then actually to Carol's comment regarding the citizens, I thought that the bar graph that you showed indicated that there really is substantial or appreciation. It's broad-based, it includes the South Platte Park, which is why we have the heart in the comprehensive plan, so I think if you could just be really clear about the money, and then I love what you're saying, Fabi, about having the board work and saying, okay, so if we're looking at a 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 year plan, what would that start to look like? And what kind of funding sources would there be? Because in some ways, dream big too. And with any board or commission that we have, if it's not working, if things are falling apart, if it's not happening, then we need to make a decision about that, so.
And what I will say, I mean, that was exactly why one of the objectives was to recommend strategies for funding, so that it is very much an objective. So they can't just skirt it and say, oh, we'll just assume it will be covered by the city or et cetera. So that was very, very deliberate and also to recognize that as some of these bigger plans may unfold or ideas come forward, again, not unlike what we're doing with our transportation mobility board and our transportation master plan, that we have to review, evaluate, and strategize around the funding that will help us to accomplish that. So I think that objective forces that to happen in order for this to be successful as well.
So, I think there were just kind of recapping, we need to get clarification on whether we've taken actual action regarding persons serving on more than one board. And then is there still a concern about having verbiage that is more clear about exclusive clarification or reporting back to council? Or are you okay with the line that was in there? That's fine. Okay. And then we've asked for clarity of the budget and we could see that. And then I think also inclusion in here, a commitment to what Abby was saying about the board's first order of business is working on what this looks like 2, 3, 4, so the council can get their heads around what to prepare for. Do you have another one?
I wonder about having the new council, is it the new council that's going to vote on this on
No, we
November
will.
19th? We will as the outgoing council.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so is there any opposition to bringing this back to council on the 19th with some of those tweaks to it?
As a resolution, yes.
Yes, it would be a resolution.
I don't want a resolution yet.
Oh, you don't, so you don't want,
Not yet.
okay.
I support that.
Karina, you don't want a resolution yet? I do. Oh. Kyle?
I do.
Meg? No, it's 4, so bring back a resolution. Okay. Great, so we will get that, and that will be, we'll get that in our packet, we have time to take a look at that. If you guys have additional questions when you get that, if something's still missing, please get back to staff quickly so that that can be tweaked and perfected for discussion then on the 19th.
Thank
Okay.
you, thank you.
Thank you very much, appreciate it. Okay, is there any other
That's it.
business
So
tonight?
review one more time, we have no council next Thursday, is that right? Or
Right, we
Tuesday?
do not have council again until November 12th, and that'll be a study session
For the lift board.
for the lift. And anything else that might pop up that we have to pop on there. We do, I think we do have another issue. Tiffany's got,
Hopefully we can go with the budget or something.
She's city manager, so she can have whatever she
Investment
wants.
policy.
yeah, the investment policy, so that will be,
12th to the 19th.
and then we're not doing the cost of service study,
Um,
maybe. So there may be a cost of service study update, and then the update to the investment policy will be there. And then on the 19th, we will have the resolution for arts and culture, we'll have a resolution of the investment policy, and then we'll have the motion for the Southern Housing Board member. And then under general business, we've got the lift and the city loan. So that'll get pushed out after the study session, and be more on the agenda. So yeah, we don't meet again until like 12.
When is your final
The 19th.
meeting, the night?
Is it new council?
8 PM on the 19th.
8 PM, and I turn into a pumpkin. Out I go.
Turns into a
It's in our charter. It's in our charter.
8 o'clock.
Oh, the city manager would like to make a comment. Acting manager.
exactly, yes.
The
I
co-op.
just wanted to let you know that Mark will be back on Thursday.
Not tomorrow.
And no snow days, no snow days.
Oh, and the city attorney.
I have nothing, thank you.
We're adjourned.